And we start out with the beginning. LGBTQ+.
This
So
is
it's gonna be
stuff.
lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer.
That's all
Then we get
new.
into some of the others, asexual, ally, cisgender, binary, gender expression,
Yeah.
gender fluid, gender identity, gender non-conforming, intersex, non-binary, pansexual, questioning, sexual orientation, transitioning. Look, this is not an exhaustive list of terms, okay? But we're gonna group them together, we're gonna talk about them, and then we're going to have a better understanding of at least what some of these are. So moving forward, starting with the first group of terms, we're gonna look at sexual orientation. The grouping of sexual orientation falls under an emotional, romantic, or physical attraction to another person. It is important to note that sexual orientation is not a choice. It is something that you're born with, and it is something that someone cannot change. Understanding a lesbian is a woman who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other women. Gay refers to a man who is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other men.
When I got my divorce.
Now, the next two terms sometimes get used interchangeably. So someone who is bisexual is emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to more than one sex, gender, or gender identity, but not necessarily at the same time or to the same degree. Someone who is pansexual is someone who has the potential for emotional, sexual, or romantic attraction to people of any gender, not necessarily at the same time or to the same degree. People tend to get confused around the issue of bisexuality or pansexuality. This is an easy way to explain it, right? I am a cisgendered white gay man, right? I have a sexual orientation where I'm emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other men. Does that mean that I am emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to all men? No. If I'm in a relationship with someone, does that mean that I am going to be emotionally, romantically, or sexually attracted to other men? No. So in the same way, when we're talking about bisexuality or pansexuality, someone doesn't have to be in a relationship. They could be in an opposite gender relationship. So a man and a woman could be in a relationship together, and one or both of those partners could still be bisexual. Asexual is a lack of sexual attraction to other people. Queer is used to express a multitude of sexual or gender identities that are counter to the mainstream. And questioning is someone who's exploring their sexual identity or gender identity. The questioning process is important to recognize, it's important to support, and it's also important to remember that just because someone is questioning their sexual orientation or gender identity and maybe exploring that now, doesn't mean that they are going to be lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. There is an old unfortunate joke that's called, that people would say someone was bi now, gay later, for example. That's really harmful to folks that are questioning or exploring their sexuality. And we need to respect the space that everyone is in, that they will get to that in their own time to determine where they want to be. And could they question again? Absolutely, that's fine. So moving on now, we're going to look in the category of gender identity. Gender identity is the innermost concept of self as male, female, both, or neither. Keep in mind that this is the innermost concept. This is how you feel about yourself. This is internal. This is your gender identity. It's what's inside and what you feel. Someone who is cisgender is a person whose gender identity aligns with those typically associated with the sex they were assigned at birth. I said before, I'm a cisgendered male. I was assigned the sex at birth, and I associate with the gender identity of male in both instances. Remember, we are assigned sex at birth in most places based on our sexual organs. Okay? Now, someone who is transgender is someone whose gender identity and or expression is different from the cultural expectations based on their assigned sex at birth. So someone who is a transgender female would have been assigned the sex male at birth, but their identity, their gender identity or their gender expression is female. Gender binary is a system in which gender is very fixed in two strict categories, either male or female. And while the world tends to operate in a gender binary sense, that is not appropriate for our discussion today, and it's important that we recognize that gender fluid is something that exists. And gender fluid is a person who does not identify with a single fixed gender or who has a fluid or unfixed gender identity. So their gender identity could fluctuate between masculine and feminine, between male and female. Remember, we talked about gender identity. Gender expression is the external appearance of one's gender identity. So someone can be transgender and have an innermost concept of their self that is opposite from their assigned sex at birth. So someone who was assigned the sex female at birth identifies within themselves as male, but may not express that until later in life. They are still transgender, all right? And gender nonconforming is people who do not behave in a way that conforms to the traditional forms of gender or whose gender does not fit into a category. And transitioning is a series of procedures that some, not all, some transgender people may undergo in order to live more fully as their true gender. Now, this is where a lot of the trans members of our community get questions. People want to know what they've done regarding hormone treatment or sexual reassignment surgery or top surgery. In the case of trans men, you need to really be sure that the person that you're talking to is comfortable answering that question before you ask. It may be better to go and do research, to read personal stories, to look things up online, to watch videos, to get a greater understanding of the transitioning process of your kids. And I appreciate that curiosity, but just remember that it may or may not be appropriate to ask that question. With that understanding, we want to look at some other important terms. Okay, coming out is the process by which one recognizes, accepts, and appreciates their sexual orientation or gender identity. Coming out is a personal process. It starts with the self. So I joke around with my friends all the time that my coming out was a very long process. It is for most members of our community. There are times in my life when I should have known, but I never got to that point of recognizing, accepting, or appreciating my sexual orientation until later in life when I was a junior or senior in college. But I was exploring that, at least mentally, as early as even before I was a freshman in college. But there's one specific instance that I'll share with you, and I love sharing stories. I remember in 1997 when it was coming out that Ellen DeGeneres was going to have the big coming out episode on her sitcom. Right? I was a freshman and living in a college dorm, and I had a roommate, and in the dorm we had this big open suite area. Okay. all my friends, everyone, they were out in the suite. Everyone always hung out there. They were watching TV, joking, doing whatever they did. My roommate was gone, probably at his girlfriend's. And I remember locking my dorm room door and turning down the volume on the TV and very quietly watching the Coming Out episode. But it's still going to be 2 years later before I can know. But, as some would say, I should have known. Coming out also is something that we do publicly, and that happens on a daily basis. And remember that just because that you know that someone is LGBTQ doesn't mean that you have the right to share that, okay? Because they may not be ready to share that at work, in certain social settings, and we'll talk about some ways that we deal with that later. The Day of Remembrance is every year on November 20th, we take the time to remember the members of our trans community whose lives were lost to acts of violence. Typically purple ribbons are worn to signify this, or purple clothing. And remember that our trans brothers and sisters experience acts of violence and hatred more often than the rest of the members of our community, especially trans women of color. The Stonewall riots happened on June 28, 1969, and it was choose as many to signify the beginning of the American gay liberation movement.
I didn't know that one either, actually.
When we're talking about Stonewall, let's also remember, and if you're working with members of our community, it's important to remember that that history has been whitewashed, and the fact that members of the trans community, especially trans women of color, lesbians, and drag queens were all at the forefront. And typically it's shown as gay white men who were starting the riot, and that's not exactly how it was. So that's a sensitive topic and something to be aware of. Drag is wearing clothes appropriate to another gender. So if I were in drag, I would be wearing women's clothing. People who are intersex are people born with a variety of differences in their sexual traits and reproductive anatomy. This is both genetic and with their physical autonomy. A kink is a sexual interest that's viewed to be non-traditional. Underscore that word viewed. Packing is wearing a dildo, strap-on, or penile prosthesis. But many members of our community who are trans men will pack on a regular basis, but that's not necessary to do. Passing is the ability to conceal intentionally or unintentionally one's sexual orientation or gender identity. If you want to get a really good understanding of passing, I encourage you to watch the show Pose. You can stream it online, and there's several great discussions there about passing, where someone can be on the street and people do not know that they're LGBTQ. I can pass. Typically times when I'm really relaxed and I'm animated and I'm letting my voice go. I'm not passing. I will sometimes dial everything way back, especially if I'm in a situation where I don't feel safe, and attempt to pass as straight or let people think that I'm straight. Sometimes I don't do it on purpose. Members of our community don't do it on purpose. Our sexual orientation and our gender identity are deeply personal, but they're still very much aspects of our life. But sometimes passing is necessary in order to be safe. And for folks that can't pass, that can put them at risk in different situations and potentially risk their safety or their lives. Polyamory is consensually being in or open to multiple loving relationships at the same time. Tribe or type are categories by which individuals may be assigned based primarily on physical or other key characteristics. And we'll go into an in-depth discussion of types and tribes in LGBTQ 201. And like any culture, the LGBTQ plus culture has a deep sense of symbolism, and the rainbow flag is a symbol of that. It's taken many forms to symbolize equality or diversity among all people. These are some of the pride flags that I want to talk about. The first one that you see, the rainbow flag, that's the one that most people are used to. The second is the trans flag. That flag was intentionally designed so no matter which way you flew it, it would always be upright. The third flag is the flag to symbolize for our brothers and sisters that are people of color. And then the next flag incorporates all three of those. And that's now known as the progressive pride flag, because you see on the far side at the beginning of the chevron, you see the trans colors, then you see the black and brown representing the people of color in our community, all of that overlaid on the rainbow background. On the bottom are three other examples, the ally flag, the bisexual flag, and the lesbian flag. This is not an exhaustive list. Nothing that we talk about is ever going to be an exhaustive list. There are probably 50, 60 or more different flags that represent different aspects of our community, different people in our community. And someone may feel that they fall into more than one type of category or flag. That's fine. We can't pigeonhole people into one linear place.
So before it wasn't letting me advance. Okay, good. It did let me. But that may make you play the full time. I think because I tried to go at literally 16 minutes and 35 seconds instead of 16:39, it made me rewatch the whole thing again. Oh. Any questions about that? Some of that was actually new info to me. Like I didn't know about the gay liberation movement in 1969. And I'm thinking in terms for social workers and groups that we lead, the one thing you said in the middle about having to like pass or fly under the radar is what we'll see a lot, especially here at our university too, where somebody will just fly under the radar just to get through unscathed and be able to move on. You know what I mean? Like not have to worry about things so much. Oh no, see, it's doing it again. I hate that. And it might have been because I accidentally right-clicked. Is that what you do on a Dell computer? I have a Mac, so I never can quite tell.
I usually highlight it, Control C.
Yeah. Right. Let's see how it's making me do the full 30 seconds again. I want to try it again, hopefully. If it wants to shut down on us. Okay, it's not good. Oh. I wonder if I'm on here. I don't think that I am. We're having another reaccreditation go on. I guess I better make sure it's muted.
I can't share because it's proprietary, but I was just amazed because their assumption is, if you don't ask me a question, I'm going to ask you a question. and so these are the kind of questions I expect you to ask, right? So, because that way I know if you're actually paying attention, if you're getting the concept that I'm trying.
I thought that I'd logged out of that completely. So, okay, on the next one. This is also new. Have you seen that one before?
Mm-mm.
I haven't seen it either. Like that's all new to me. Let's
So the pink,
go ahead.
Mama asked, the pink is, oh, that was the pink flag.
They said that's for the trans flag
Trans.
because
So
it's
what
the
is
same.
brown one?
The brown one, they said it's for
Because
people of
it's-
color.
Huh?
They said it's for people of color.
So that's basically a gay, trans, black,
So-
an African American trans. Gay.
Yeah, but it's supposed to include all of them. So I guess it's just like an ally flag. Oh wait, what are you familiar with?
But I don't know.
Right.
Like they-
Right, I know. I'm going to see. Okay, Madison said, never heard of passing, but that makes sense. Additionally, I like the explained very well for everyone to understand. Yeah, so they're they're asking, I guess this is the way they tell if you're like engaging with the training. Let's see here. Submit all. So I don't think there's any wrong answers. It's just like a survey. But they're trying to see. I thought there was one more like 12-minute video, but I could be wrong. That's 7. And that way we get you to 25 till. Oh, you have to hit play. Is it
So
the
now with
same?
that basic knowledge, we understand a little more of the terminology, we understand some of the symbolism. I want to take some time to talk about delayed cultural knowledge and acceptance within the LGBTQ plus community. So from a childhood development perspective, and we need to sort of take a step back and look at all people together, all right? So from a childhood development perspective, societal or cultural influences influence the choices the parents make, which in turn influence who their kids will become. So the values of the society or culture that the parents subscribe to is very clearly going to influence the choices they make, which then influence their kids, right? So this could be something as simple as focusing on the individual or the collective, being restrained in your choices or indulgent. For part of my life, I was raised in a very fundamentalist household, and there was a lot of focus on the collective and a lot of focus on restraint. There was a requirement that you give certain percentages of your income back to the church in your time, and that you not be seen as flashy or show off. That's how my mother felt. That's how she raised me. And even today, I still have some of those same thoughts, although not to the same extent that she did. Now, this world that the parents create through their values and through their parenting choices is reinforced by observational learning on behalf of the children. This comes through media, actions of the parents, other adults, other kids that are brought into the social circle. So remember, we're creating this entire world around the individual, and this very much plays a role in how they're going to develop. So children who know their family or cultural history grow up with a stronger sense of identity and self-worth. So we know that we tell stories, right? We tell stories about our family, we tell stories about our culture. Those stories reinforce the values that we just talked about. All of that together gives children a strong sense of identity and a strong sense of self-worth because they know who they are. They know where they came from. They have this sense of community. But how then do LGBTQ plus individuals suffer from a lack of knowledge about this part of their life, about this community that they're a part of? Remember, we can be parts, and we are parts of multiple communities. I am white, I am a man, I am a father, I am the father of a Black girl, I am gay, I play rugby, I run, I like baking. All of these are different communities that I'm a part of. But I never knew about this major aspect of myself about being a part of the LGBTQ plus community until later in life. And neither have most members of my community. So without a cultural history, LGBTQ plus youth will not have the ability to know about their collective history. Remember, they're not growing up with these stories, with these values. Most members of our community are not going to grow up with these, especially folks that are my age or older, didn't grow up with those. They may not have ever even met, another member of the LGBTQ plus community until later in life. So therefore, we lack a strong sense of community or community history. So if I don't have it, if I don't know about it, if I'm not raised with those values, with those stories, with those reinforced images and songs and things like that. I mean, I'll tell you, growing up, we had a lot of values that centered around hard work and doing the best that you can. And that was reinforced through my father and my grandfather and other members of my family giving 110% in their jobs in order to provide for their family. They reinforced that through the music that we listened to. We listened to a lot of country growing up, a lot of it. And to this day, I can still hear the record player going, and I can hear Barbara Mandrell, and I can hear Sylvia, and I can hear Willie Nelson, and all of those songs reinforce that. But I never had the other part, right? The visual representations, the stories, the music, the history of my queer identity. So because of all that, members of our community have lower rates of social support. There's no system to fall back on, right? If I'm having difficulties in my family, maybe I can reach out to a sister or a cousin or one parent or the other parent or somebody else in that aspect of my life. But growing up, I didn't have anyone to reach out to about this aspect, about my queer identity. And we sometimes have to fight against the culture that we learned as a child, right? We're taught things. We're taught that, maybe being gay is evil, that you can be cured of it. I told you before that I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian household, and that happened for a lot of my life. And so I had a lot of these ideas in the back of my head. And one of those was that being gay was evil. And that through punishment, I could cure myself of evil. So even as a young adult, I thought that this could be fixed. And I remember in college and even in high school, going and taking showers where the water was nothing but hot in order to try to cleanse, for lack of a better phrase, myself of this part of me that I thought was evil. And I'm not the only one that's like that. Members of our community have to fight against what they were taught. And these are deep-rooted values. And even after coming out, after embracing, after loving yourself and your sexual orientation and your gender identity, there are still going to be times when members of our community have to fight against that. And when you're working with this, especially in a context where you're providing counseling or care, it's important to recognize that.
Okay, I wanted to make sure to end this.